Admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking down at the blue planet below. Earth spun slowly in the darkness of space, unaware that death watched from above. The alien commander's scaled lips curved into what his species called a smile, though no human would recognize it as such. "Are the cameras ready?" asked his communications officer. "Yes, Admiral. All galactic networks are prepared to receive our broadcast. Every civilized world will witness this demonstration." Nodded, the Empire had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. They had destroyed dozens of species, but always quickly and quietly. Today would be different. Today would send a message to every world that dared to exist without permission. The humans below had been transmitting signals into space for decades. Their radio waves and television broadcasts had reached space 2 years ago. The High Council had laughed at the primitive creatures who still used chemical rockets and fought wars with metal bullets. But their signals revealed something useful. They had large population centers, perfect for a demonstration. "Begin the broadcast," ordered. "Let the galaxy see what happens to vermin who pollute space with their noise." On Earth, it was a normal Tuesday morning. In New York, people rushed to work through busy streets. In Tokyo, families ate breakfast while watching morning news. In London, children played in parks under gray skis. In Mumbai, vendors sold fresh fruit from crowded stalls. In Cairo, tourists marveled at ancient pyramids. In Sydney, surfers rode waves under the bright sun. In Mexico City, artists painted murals on building walls. None of them knew they had been chosen to die. The first sign was a shadow. In New York, office workers looked up to see massive ships blocking out the sun. The vessels were unlike anything in human science fiction, smooth and organic, like giant metal insects. They hovered silently above the city, casting darkness over millions of people. Sarah Martinez was drinking coffee in her Manhattan apartment when the shadow fell across her window. She looked outside and saw the impossible sight. The ship above was so large it covered dozens of city blocks. Fear froze her blood as she reached for her phone to call her brother. Similar scenes played out across 6 other cities. The ships appeared without warning over Tokyo, London, Mumbai, Cairo, Sydney, and Mexico City. Panic began to spread as people ran through streets, pointing at the sky and screaming in languages the aliens would never bother to learn. On his bridge, Admiral watched the chaos below with satisfaction. His tactical officer reported that all ships were in position. 7 major human population centers were targeted. The weapons were charged and ready. "Citizens of the galaxy," spoke into the broadcast transmitter. His words would reach every civilized world within hours. "Today you witness the fate of those who dare to pollute our galaxy with their primitive signals. The creatures on this world call themselves humans. They have filled space with their crude communications for decades, disturbing the peace of our empire." On Earth, television and radio signals suddenly cut out. Every screen on the planet showed the same image, Admiral's reptilian face, speaking in a language no human understood. But the translation came through clearly in every Earth language. "Watch and learn what happens to vermin," the alien continued. "Let this be a lesson to all worlds. The Empire tolerates no disrespect." In New York, Sarah pressed against her window and saw smaller ships dropping from the main vessel. They moved like deadly insects, positioning themselves over different neighborhoods. Green light began to glow from weapons that no human science could comprehend. The first strike hit Times Square at exactly 12:00 p.m. Eastern Time. The green beam lasted only 3 seconds, but when it ended, 8 city blocks had simply vanished. Buildings, streets, cars, and people over 50,000 humans turned to atoms in an instant. Where they had stood, only smoking craters remained. Sarah screamed and fell backward as the blast wave shattered every window in her building. The ship above her neighborhood began to glow with the same deadly green light. Across the world, the same horror unfolded. In Tokyo, the business district disappeared in seconds. Ancient temples and modern skyscrapers melted away like ice in fire. In London, the Thames boiled as energy beams carved through the city center. Big Ben fell silent forever as it crumbled into dust. Mumbai's crowded markets became silent graveyards. The smell of spices was replaced by the stench of vaporized concrete. In Cairo, the pyramids still stood, but the city around them burned. The aliens had specifically spared the ancient monuments. They made better landmarks for their cameras. Sydney's harbor turned red with reflected fire as the downtown area collapsed. The famous opera house survived, but its windows melted from the heat of nearby destruction. In Mexico City, colorful murals became shadows burned into walls as their artists died in seconds. The alien commentator's voice continued throughout the massacre. "Notice how efficiently our weapons work," he said with casual interest. "Each shot removes exactly what we target. No waste, no mess. This is the technology gap between the Empire and primitive species." Admiral watched his instruments count the dead. 1 million, 2 million. The numbers climbed higher as his ships systematically destroyed population centers. His crew worked with professional calm, adjusting targeting systems and calculating the most effective kill zones. "Magnificent," he said to his tactical officer. "The cameras are capturing everything perfectly. Every species in the galaxy will see this recording." The slaughter continued for 6 hours. The alien ships moved methodically through each city, vaporizing neighborhoods one by one. They left just enough infrastructure intact to ensure maximum viewership, power stations to keep televisions running, communication towers to broadcast their message. By sunset on Earth, 7 million humans were dead. The survivors huddled in ruins, watching bodies turn to ash in the evening wind. The alien ships had stopped firing, but they still hovered above the destroyed cities like metallic vultures. Admiral appeared on every working screen one final time. "This demonstration is complete," he announced. "We have eliminated 7 million examples of this species, but millions more remain alive to carry our message to other worlds." He leaned forward, his alien eyes reflecting the fires burning below. "Humans of Earth, you have 72 standard hours to surrender your planet unconditionally. If you refuse, every remaining member of your species will join the dead. Choose wisely." The transmission ended. The ships began to withdraw to a safe distance, confident that their message had been received. Admiral settled back in his command chair and smiled. Another successful demonstration. Another species would soon bow to rule. Below, in the smoking ruins of Earth's greatest cities, something began to stir in the human survivors. It was not the fear the aliens expected. It was not the despair they had seen in other species. It was rage, pure, cold, infinite rage. President Maria stood in the emergency bunker beneath Washington, D.C., staring at screens that showed the destruction across the globe. The images came from satellites, news drones, and surviving security cameras. Smoke rose from 7 massive graves that had once been humanity's greatest cities. "Madam President," General said quietly, "the casualty reports are confirmed. 7 million dead in 6 hours. The aliens targeted civilian populations specifically." Closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them again, something had changed. The politician who had spent years making careful compromises was gone. In her place stood something harder. "What are our military options?" she asked. General shook his head. "Against that technology, nothing effective. Our nuclear weapons couldn't scratch those ships. They're using energy systems we don't even understand." "So you're recommending surrender?" "Ma'am, they could wipe out our entire species. If we surrender now, maybe we can save the remaining population. Maybe we can negotiate some kind of treaty." President turned to face the screens again. One camera showed a young girl in Mumbai, maybe 8 years old, sitting next to what used to be her home. She was calling for her mother, who had been vaporized 6 hours earlier. "Get me the leaders of every major nation," said. "Emergency video conference in 1 hour." Around the world, similar conversations were happening in government bunkers. In Moscow, Premier watched his generals present surrender plans. In Beijing, Chairman Li studied reports about alien technology. In London, the Prime Minister met with what remained of Parliament in an underground facility. But something unexpected was happening on the streets above. Instead of panic and despair, crowds were gathering in every major city. Instead of running away, people were moving toward government buildings, military bases, and research centers. Doctors stood in the ruins of the MIT campus outside Boston. The aliens had spared this area, but debris from the Boston attack covered everything in gray dust. She held a device that measured exotic radiation energy signatures unlike anything in human physics. "Professor, look at this," her graduate student said. He pointed at his scanner readings. "The alien weapons left behind some kind of particle trail. It's fatting fast, but it's still detectable." Stared at the data. Her mind began working through possibilities. Every weapon left evidence. Every energy system had a signature. Even alien technology had to follow certain physical laws. Call everyone in our department who's still alive. Get them here immediately, and contact the physics departments at every major university. We need to share this data. Across the world, similar discoveries were beginning. In Tokyo, a surviving engineer found metal fragments with properties that known materials science. In Cairo, archaeologists noticed that the pyramid stones had been changed by exposure to alien energy. In Sydney, marine biologists detected strange isotopes in the harbor water. The emergency conference between world leaders began exactly 1 hour after President's call. Faces appeared on screens in bunkers around the globe. Every leader looked exhausted and shaken. "We all know why we're here," President began. "The question is simple. Do we surrender to save lives or do we find another option?" Premier spoke first. "My military advisors say resistance is impossible. We should negotiate for the best surrender terms we can get." "What terms?" snapped the British Prime Minister. "They murdered 7 million innocent people for entertainment. They broadcast it like a sports event. What makes you think they'll honor any agreement?" Chairman Lee leaned forward. "My intelligence services have been monitoring global communications since the attack. Something unusual is happening. Our people are not acting like defeated populations. They're mobilizing." President had seen the same reports. Instead of fleeing major cities, people were flooding into them. Scientists were abandoning their homes to reach laboratories. Engineers were sleeping in factories. Military recruitment centers were overwhelmed with volunteers. "There's something else," said. "Our scientists are finding traces of alien technology, evidence left behind by their weapons. Doctor at MIT believes she can reverse engineer their energy signatures." The French president shook her head. "Even if we learn how their weapons work, we can't build a fleet to match theirs. They have a galactic empire, we have chemical rockets." "Maybe," replied, "but they made a mistake. They wanted to demonstrate their power, so they used it slowly and openly. They gave us time to study their methods, and they underestimated what humans do when we're truly angry." In laboratories around the world, the greatest minds of Earth were beginning to work together in ways never seen before. Language barriers disappeared as scientists shared data through translation programs. National security restrictions vanished as governments opened their most classified research files. Doctor found herself coordinating with teams in 12 countries. The exotic particles left by alien weapons contained information about propulsion systems, energy generation, and materials science far beyond human capability. But the data was there, waiting to be decoded. "It's like they left us a blueprint," she told her team during a video conference with researchers in London and Tokyo. "Their weapons interact with space-time in ways we never imagined, but if we can understand the principles." In Colorado, the NORAD command center had become a hive of activity. Every surviving satellite was redirected to scan for alien ships. Radar stations around the globe fed data into supercomputers that analyzed alien movement patterns. Colonel Sarah, daughter of the president, stood in the command center watching the tactical displays. She had graduated from the Air Force Academy 3 months ago and was supposed to be flying transport missions. Instead, she found herself studying alien fleet formations. "Colonel," one of the technicians said, "we're picking up something strange. The alien ships aren't patrolling randomly. They're following specific patterns like they're searching for something." Sarah studied the data. "They're looking for our military assets, trying to locate our weapons and command centers." "Should we hide our installations?" "No," Sarah said, a cold smile forming on her face. "Let them look. Let them think they understand what we're capable of. Meanwhile, we learn everything we can about how they operate." In the ruins of New York, cleanup crews were finding more than debris. Engineers discovered that the alien energy weapons had created new crystalline structures in the melted steel and concrete. The crystals contained energy that pulsed with the same frequency as the alien ships. Dr. James Park, a materials scientist who had lost his wife in the Times Square attack, studied the crystals with tears in his eyes and fury in his heart. "These formations shouldn't be possible," he told his team. "The energy patterns suggest the aliens use some kind of quantum field manipulation." "Can we replicate it?" asked his assistant. Maybe, but first, we use it to track them. Park held up a crystal fragment that glowed softly with alien energy. This responds to their ships. If we can build a network of these detectors, we can monitor every alien vessel in our solar system. 48 hours after the massacre, the world leaders met again. This time, the conversation was very different. "Report from our science teams," President began. "We've made breakthrough discoveries about alien technology. Doctor believes she can create a tracking system within 2 weeks. Our military analysts have identified weaknesses in their tactical patterns," added General. "They rely heavily on superior technology but show little creativity in their strategies." Chairman Lee smiled grimly. "Our manufacturing capacity is being converted to military production. Every factory, every 3D printer, every workshop is now building components for new weapon systems." The British Prime Minister looked around at the other leaders. "Are we seriously considering war against a galactic empire?" "No," President replied. "We're considering the complete destruction of the species that murdered our people. There's a difference." Premier nodded slowly. "In Russia, we have a saying, if you want peace, prepare for war. But sometimes, when someone kills your family, you don't want peace anymore." As the conference ended, each leader returned to their bunkers with the same purpose. Surrender was no longer being discussed. Negotiation was off the table. The only remaining question was not whether humanity would fight back, but how complete their victory would be. High above Earth, Admiral reviewed reports from his surveillance teams. The humans were behaving strangely for a defeated species. Instead of fleeing or hiding, they seemed to be gathering and organizing. "Perhaps they're preparing for mass suicide," suggested his tactical officer. "Dismiss the idea. More likely they're planning some primitive resistance. Let them waste their time with metal bullets and chemical explosives. In 24 hours, we'll finish what we started." He settled back in his chair and smiled. Soon, another world would bow to the Empire. The demonstration would be complete, and the galaxy would remember why they ruled the stars. But below, in the smoking ruins of Earth cities, humanity was preparing something the galaxy had never seen before. 3 weeks after the massacre, Earth had transformed into something unrecognizable. Doctor stood in what used to be the physics laboratory, now expanded into a massive complex that stretched across half of Cambridge. Scientists from 43 countries worked together in a facility that operated 24 hours a day. "You need to see this," called Dr. James Park from across the lab. The materials scientist had dark circles under his eyes from weeks of continuous work, but his voice carried excitement that cut through his exhaustion. Hurried to Park's workstation, where a holographic display showed the molecular structure of the alien energy crystals. The display rotated slowly, revealing patterns that seemed to fold space around themselves. "I think I understand how their propulsion works," Park said. "They're not moving through space in the traditional sense. They're folding space-time and stepping through the folds." "That's impossible," replied, but her voice lacked conviction. 3 weeks of studying alien technology had taught her that impossible was just another word for not yet understood. "Look at the quantum field patterns," Park continued. He highlighted specific areas of the crystal structure. "These formations create localized space-time distortions if we can replicate them at a larger scale." His breath caught. "We could build ships that travel faster than their fastest vessels. We could appear anywhere in their territory without warning." Across the complex, Doctor worked with a team of engineers on weapon systems. The young Japanese scientist had lost her entire family in the Tokyo attack, and her grief had transformed into a cold determination that impressed even the military advisors. "The alien energy weapons operate on a principle of matter conversion," she explained to General during his daily briefing. "They don't destroy targets so much as convince matter to stop existing in its current form." "Can we build similar weapons?" asked. "Better ones," replied with a smile that held no warmth. "Their weapons are designed for intimidation and mass destruction. Ours will be designed for complete elimination. No trace, no survivors, no possibility of recovery." In underground facilities across the globe, production lines worked at impossible speeds. Factories that once built cars now assembled components for spacecraft. 3D printers that had made toys now created exotic materials that existed nowhere else in the solar system. President toured the main production facility beneath the Nevada desert. Row after row of robotic assembly lines stretched beyond sight, each one building parts for humanity's revenge. The noise was deafening, but it was the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. "Ma'am," shouted the facility director over the mechanical roar, "we're ahead of schedule on all primary systems. The first prototype ships should be ready for testing in 1 week." Nodded and moved to the next section, where human workers assembled the final components by hand. These were not ordinary factory workers. They were artists, musicians, teachers, and accountants who had volunteered to work 18-hour shifts building weapons of war. Each one had lost someone in the attacks. Maria Santos had been a kindergarten teacher in Mexico City. Now she welded power conduits for plasma cannons with surgical precision. "My students were playing in the schoolyard when the beam hit," she told. 23 5-year-olds turned to dust in seconds. I want the aliens to know their names before they die. In orbit around Earth, construction proceeded on humanity's first interstellar warfleet. The ships bore no resemblance to any previous human spacecraft. They were sleek, organic-looking vessels that seemed to grow rather than be built. Human engineering had merged with alien principles to create something entirely new. Colonel Sarah floated in the command center of the lead ship, watching technicians install the final systems. The bridge was unlike anything from science fiction movies. Instead of buttons and switches, the controls responded to thought patterns through neural interfaces derived from alien technology. "Colonel," called Lieutenant Martinez from the navigation station, "the Fold space drive is online. Initial tests show we can travel between star systems in hours instead of years." Sarah nodded. 3 weeks ago, she had been a transport pilot. Now she commanded humanity's most advanced warship. The learning curve had been steep, but grief was an excellent teacher. "What about the targeting systems?" she asked. "Fully operational, ma'am. We can track ships across multiple light years using their own energy signatures against them. They'll never see us coming." Meanwhile, Admiral grew increasingly puzzled by human behavior. His surveillance teams reported massive construction projects across the planet, but the structures made no sense. The humans seemed to be building industrial facilities rather than defensive positions. "Perhaps they're preparing to manufacture goods for tribute," suggested his communications officer. Was not convinced. "Send a probe closer to their planet. I want detailed scans of their construction projects." The probe descended through Earth's atmosphere and began photographing the human installations. What it found confused the analysts even more. The humans were not building anything that matched known patterns of surrender or tribute preparation. Dr. Michael worked in a facility that the probe would have photographed if it had survived long enough. The quantum physicist stood before a massive device that hummed with barely contained energy. Around him, his team made final adjustments to humanity's first practical application of alien technology. "Remember," told his technicians, "this weapon doesn't just destroy ships, it erases them from existence. Past, present, and future. When we fire this at something, it never existed in the first place." One of the younger scientists raised her hand nervously. "Doctor, is it ethical to erase an entire species from history?" Turned to face her, and she saw something terrible in his eyes. "They broadcast the murder of 7 million people like it was entertainment. They laughed while children died. Ethics stopped applying the moment they pulled the trigger." Above them, the alien probe transmitted its final images before something reached up from Earth and made it cease to exist. The images showed industrial facilities, construction projects, and millions of humans working with purpose that they could not understand. In his flagship, Admiral studied the probe's data with growing unease. The humans were not behaving like any species he had encountered before. Most civilizations either surrendered immediately or mounted futile defensive efforts. These creatures were building something, but their technology was too primitive to threaten the Empire. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "we're receiving strange energy readings from the human planet. The signatures don't match any known technology." "Impossible," replied. "They're barely above Stone Age level. What kind of energy could they be generating?" "Unknown, sir, but the readings are increasing daily." Doctor stood in the central command center that coordinated Earth's war effort. Screens around her showed progress reports from every continent. Weapons production was ahead of schedule. Ship construction was proceeding perfectly. Most importantly, her teams had cracked the alien communication codes. President's voice came through the communication system. "Are we ready?" Looked at the data one final time. Humanity now possessed technology that surpassed their attackers in every category. Human ships were faster, human weapons were more destructive, and human determination was absolute. "We're ready, Madam President. Our fleet can travel to any point in space and eliminate their forces before they can respond. Our weapons can erase not just their ships, but their entire civilization." And there, we've located Zephyr Prime. It's a heavily defended system with over 12 billion alien civilians. Paused, thinking of 7 million human civilians who had been murdered for entertainment. It would take approximately 6 hours to eliminate all life in their system. President was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of humanity's rage. "Do they have any colony worlds?" 47 inhabited planets, ma'am. Total population is approximately 200 billion. How long to eliminate them all? Had run the calculations many times. 3 weeks if we're thorough, 2 weeks if we focus on maximum efficiency. Begin the operation. I want their species extinct before the month ends. Colonel Sarah received the launch order while standing on the bridge of humanity's flagship. Around her, the greatest fleet ever built by any species prepared for departure. 143 ships that could fold space-time, carrying weapons that could erase matter from existence. "All ships report ready, Colonel," Lieutenant Martinez announced. Sarah looked out at the stars where her targets waited. The thought they had taught humanity about fear and helplessness. Instead, they had taught humanity something much more dangerous, that some acts could never be forgiven and some species did not deserve to continue existing. "Signal the fleet," Sarah commanded. "Humanity goes to war." The ships vanished from Earth orbit in complete silence. Space folded around them as they stepped between dimensions, carrying death toward an empire that had no idea what was coming. Admiral detected the energy signatures moments before the first human ship appeared in his sensor range. By then, it was far too late. The last thing he saw was a vessel that looked like a predator made of starlight, beautiful and terrible beyond imagination. The hunt had begun. The first to die never saw his killer coming. Commander was monitoring a supply convoy near the Arcturus system when his ship simply stopped existing. One moment he was reviewing cargo manifests. The next moment there was nothing where his vessel had been. No explosion, no debris, no distress signal. Just empty space where a heavy cruiser and its crew of 3,000 had been seconds before. Admiral received the report while stationed at the edge of human space, waiting for Earth's surrender deadline to expire. The message confused him. Ships didn't just disappear. Even if they were destroyed completely, there would be traces of the explosion. "Send a patrol to investigate," he ordered his tactical officer. "The humans may have developed some kind of new weapon." The patrol found nothing. No wreckage, no energy signatures, no evidence that anything had ever existed in that location. It was as if Commander and his ship had been erased from history itself. Colonel Sarah watched the patrol ship search through her targeting system. Her flagship remained invisible, hidden by stealth technology that bent light and gravity around the hull. The human fleet had been hunting for 48 hours, and the still had no idea they were under attack. "Target acquired," reported Lieutenant Martinez from the weapons station. "Heavy destroyer, approximately 2,000 crew members." "Fire," Sarah commanded without emotion. The quantum eraser beam reached across space in microseconds. The destroyer experienced a brief moment of existing, then retroactively never having existed at all. The alien crew didn't have time to register their own deaths because, from the universe's perspective, they had never been born. "Next target," Sarah said. The pattern repeated across 17 star systems. Human ships appeared without warning, eliminated vessels, and vanished before any response was possible. The aliens began to report ships disappearing from their own fleets while they watched. Doctor monitored the campaign from Earth's command center. Her screens showed the locations of every ship in known space, tracked through their own energy signatures. The aliens had no idea that their weapons technology could be turned against them so completely. "How many have we eliminated?" President asked during the daily briefing. 847 ships in the first week, replied. They have lost approximately 12% of their total fleet. They still don't know who's attacking them. Are they trying to communicate with us? No, ma'am. They seem to think this is some kind of new enemy species. Their intelligence services are investigating other galactic civilizations, looking for someone with advanced stealth technology. President smiled coldly. Let them wonder how long before they figure out it's us. Based on their tactical patterns, they're too arrogant to consider that a primitive species could develop superior technology. They'll probably blame internal sabotage before they suspect Earth. Admiral was beginning to panic. In 1 week, he had lost more ships than in the previous century of galactic enforcement. The attacks came from nowhere, struck without warning, and left no evidence. His crews were starting to refuse patrol assignments. Admiral, his intelligence officer reported, we've analyzed the attack patterns. The mysterious enemy seems to be targeting our supply lines and isolated ships first. They're avoiding our main battle fleets. Smart tactics, admitted grudgingly. But what species has this technology? Our databases show no civilization capable of these weapons. Sir, there is one possibility we haven't considered. Turn to face the officer. Speak. The humans, we gave them 3 weeks to surrender. Perhaps they used that time to develop countermeasures. The bridge fell silent, then began to laugh, a harsh sound that echoed through the command center. You think those primitive apes built a fleet capable of hunting forces? They can barely leave their own atmosphere. But sir, the timing matches perfectly. The attacks began exactly 3 weeks after our demonstration. Slaughter stopped abruptly. He stared at the star charts showing his dwindling fleet positions. It was impossible, but so was losing ships to an invisible enemy. Send a probe to Earth, he ordered. Full stealth mode. I want to see what those creatures are actually doing. The probe never reached Earth. It was detected and eliminated while still 3 light-years away from the solar system. The quantum eraser beam reached back through space-time and convinced reality that the probe had never been built in the first place. Colonel Sarah reviewed the interception report with satisfaction. They're finally starting to suspect us, she told her tactical team, which means they'll start making desperate moves. Should we change our strategy? Asked Lieutenant Martinez. Number desperation makes them predictable. Continue hunting their outer forces. Let them group their remaining ships together. It will make the final phase more efficient. On the bridge of his flagship, Admiral studied reports from across the galaxy. The pattern was becoming clear. Every ship that had disappeared was in the outer territories, far from the main strongholds. Whatever enemy they faced was systematically weakening the Empire's reach. Order all outer patrols to return to defended systems, he commanded. If this enemy wants to hunt, we'll give them targets they can't ignore. It was exactly what Sarah had been waiting for. As forces concentrated in their main systems, human ships moved like ghosts through the emptied space. Colonies that had been defended suddenly found themselves alone and vulnerable. Doctor's weapons performed perfectly. Alien settlements didn't just die, they were retroactively removed from history. Planets that had supported billions became empty worlds where life had never evolved. The alien empire was being erased from existence, one world at a time. Admiral, communications officer reported with a trembling voice, we're receiving distress calls from the colonies. All 7 worlds report that they're under attack by unknown forces. Send reinforcements immediately. Sir, the colonies are no longer on our star charts. According to our navigation computers, those systems were never colonized. Felt something he had never experienced before, genuine fear. An enemy that could erase history itself was beyond anything the Empire had ever faced. Get me a direct communication link to Earth, he ordered. Sir, do it now. If the humans are responsible for this, I need to negotiate with them before our entire species is eliminated. The message reached Earth 12 hours later. President, Doctor, and the other leaders listened to Admiral's transmission in the underground command center. Humans of Earth, the alien Admiral's voice was strained and desperate. If you are responsible for the attacks on our forces, we are prepared to negotiate a ceasefire. We can discuss terms that benefit both our species. President looked around the room at her advisors. Each face reflected the same cold determination. Doctor, how many worlds are left? 41, ma'am. We've eliminated 6 of their major colonies and 17 minor outposts. Their fleet strength is down to 30%. How many humans did they kill in their demonstration? 7 million, ma'am. Activated the communication system. Her voice, when she spoke, carried no emotion whatsoever. Admiral, this is President Maria of Earth. You broadcast the murder of 7 million innocent people for the entertainment of your empire. You laughed while our children died. You called us vermin and demanded our surrender. She paused, letting her words sink in across the light years between them. There will be no negotiation. There will be no ceasefire. There will be no mercy. Your species has 72 hours to experience what you taught us about helplessness. Consider this our demonstration. The transmission ended. Around the galaxy, human ships received their final orders. The hunting phase was over. The extermination phase would begin at dawn. Admiral stared at the silent communication panel in his flagship bridge. For the first time in history, their empire faced an enemy that was not only stronger than they were, but utterly committed to their complete destruction. He looked out at the stars and wondered how many of his people would be alive to see another sunrise. The humans had turned the galaxy itself into their hunting ground, and the had become the prey. In the distance, space began to fold as human ships prepared for the final assault. The hunt was ending, but the war was just beginning. Zephyr Prime hung in space like a green and gold jewel, beautiful and ancient. The of the Empire had existed for millions of years, hosting a civilization that had ruled the galaxy for 12 billion aliens lived on its surface, unaware that death was coming for them at the speed of folded spacetime. Colonel Sarah stood on the bridge of her flagship as humanity's war fleet emerged from fold space at the edge of the Zephyr system. 143 human ships materialized simultaneously, their quantum stealth systems making them nearly invisible against the cosmic background. Tactical assessment, Sarah commanded. Lieutenant Martinez studied his displays with professional calm. 47 battleships defending the orbital defense platforms numbering in the thousands. Energy shields protecting major population centers. They're ready for a siege, not for what we're about to do. Sarah nodded. The aliens still thought in terms of conventional warfare. They expected fleets to exchange fire across vast distances while ground forces fought for territory. They had no concept of an enemy that could simply delete their entire civilization from existence. Admiral is hailing us, reported the communications officer. Put him through. The alien admiral's face appeared on the main screen. He looked older than he had during the massacre broadcast 6 weeks ago. His scales had lost their luster, and his eyes held the exhaustion of someone who had watched his empire crumble ship by ship. Colonel said, his voice carrying a dignity that surprised Sarah. I know why you're here. My people committed an unforgivable act against yours. I cannot ask for mercy we do not deserve. But there are 12 billion civilians on my who had nothing to do with the attack on Earth. Sarah studied the alien who had ordered the deaths of 7 million humans for entertainment. Admiral, when your ships destroyed our cities, did you consider that there were 7 million civilians who had nothing to do with any conflict between our species? No, replied honestly. We did not. We saw your people as inferior beings whose lives had no meaning. And now? The alien admiral was quiet for a long moment. Now I understand that we were the inferior beings. Your species accomplished in 6 weeks what my empire needed 3,000 years to achieve. You became our superiors in every way that matters. Sarah felt no satisfaction from the admission. Revenge was not about making enemies acknowledge their mistakes. It was about ensuring they never made them again. Admiral, you gave us 72 hours to surrender or face extinction. I'm giving you the same choice. In 72 hours, your star system will cease to exist. Use that time however you see fit. The transmission ended. Around Zephyr Prime, the human fleet spread out into attack formations that the defending aliens couldn't detect. Quantum stealth technology made the human ships appear as empty space to sensors. On Earth, Doctor monitored the final battle from the Global Command Center. Every screen showed data from the human fleet as it prepared to end a species that had ruled the galaxy since before human civilization began. President's voice came through the communication system. Are you certain about the weapon systems? Once we fire, there's no revering the process. looked at the quantum equations that govern the erasure beams. The mathematics were elegant in their simplicity and terrifying in their implications. Yes, ma'am. When we activate the system-wide erasers, the Zephyr star will retroactively never have formed. The planets will never have existed. Their species will be removed from the timeline completely. No traces left behind. None. Other species will remember them through historical records, but the physical universe will be altered to reflect a reality where never evolved. President was quiet for several seconds. Proceed with the operation. Admiral used his final hours to send a message to every species in the galaxy. The broadcast went out on all communication frequencies, reaching civilizations that had never heard of humans but knew the power of the Empire. Citizens of the galaxy, spoke from his command bridge as human ships positioned themselves for the final attack. I am Admiral of the Empire. In 6 weeks, my civilization will cease to exist, eliminated by a species we underestimated completely. The alien admiral looked directly into the camera, his expression carrying the weight of 3,000 years of galactic history. We believed ourselves superior to all other life forms. We used our technology to intimidate and destroy species we considered inferior. 6 weeks ago, we murdered 7 million humans to demonstrate our power to the galaxy. Paused, watching his tactical displays as more human ships appeared in sensor range. The aliens still couldn't target them, but they could detect the distortions their presence created in local space-time. The humans responded by building technology that surpasses ours in every category. Their ships are faster than anything we ever imagined. Their weapons don't just destroy, they erase targets from existence itself. In 6 weeks, they have eliminated 90% of our empire. On planets throughout the galaxy, various species watched the broadcast with growing amazement. The had seemed invincible for. The idea that a previously unknown species could defeat them so completely was almost impossible to believe. I am transmitting this message as a warning, continued. The humans are not like us. When we conquered species, we enslaved them or destroyed them quickly. When the humans decide you are their enemy, they will hunt you across time itself until your species never existed. The broadcast ended as the 72-hour deadline expired. Colonel Sarah gave the final order from the bridge of her flagship. All ships, fire at will. 143 quantum eraser beams reached across space simultaneously. They struck not just the ships and planets, but the star itself. The energy went deeper than matter, deeper than atoms, deeper than the fundamental forces that held reality together. The Zephyr system experienced a moment of perfect crystalline silence. Then it began to unravel backward through time. First the planets cracked and dissolved, their matter forgetting how to exist. The moons followed, their gravitational fields collapsing into nothingness. The defending fleet tried to fire back, but their weapons struck targets that were no longer there. Admiral had time for one final thought as his flagship dissolved around him. He had lived to see his species reach the pinnacle of galactic power, and he had lived to see them face something greater than themselves. It was, he realized, exactly what they deserved. The star went last, its nuclear fires cooling and dimming as the universe edited its existence from the cosmic record. Where Zephyr Prime had blazed for billions of years, space became empty and cold. Doctor watched the readings from Earth sensors as the erasure completed. Confirmed destruction of the Zephyr system. All matter in a 12-light-year radius has been retroactively prevented from forming. The species is extinct. President stood in the command center, surrounded by screens that showed empty space where an empire had existed moments before. Signal our fleet to return home. Send a message to all galactic civilizations. I want them to know who ended the empire and why. The message went out on every frequency, reaching every known species in the galaxy. It was simple, direct, and absolute. Citizens of the galaxy, this is President Maria of Earth. The Empire has been eliminated for crimes against humanity. Their species murdered 7 million of our people while broadcasting the massacre for entertainment. They have paid the ultimate price for their actions. The message paused, allowing the implications to sink in across 1,000 worlds. Humanity seeks no empire. We want no subjects. We claim no territory beyond our own system. But we remember every wrong done against us, and we have the power to ensure that those wrongs are never repeated. Choose your actions wisely. Colonel Sarah stood on the observation deck of her flagship as it folded space for the journey home. Behind them lay empty space where the galaxy's greatest empire had once ruled. Ahead lay Earth, where 7 million graves reminded humanity why some acts could never be forgiven. Dr. James Park placed the final memorial in the empty space where Zephyr Prime had existed. The crystalline monument contained the names of every human who had died in the alien attack, written in letters of light that would shine until the universe itself ended. The inscription at the base was simple. They thought we would kneel. They learned we only kneel for our dead. As the human fleet disappeared into fold space, heading home to a blue world that had learned to reach across time itself for vengeance, the galaxy settled into a new age of peace. No species would test humanity's patience again. In the endless silence where the Empire had once existed, space itself whispered a warning that would echo through eternity. Some species should never be pushed to anger, because when they finally respond, they don't just win